Great, thanks so much. So the way I'd like to do the interview is I'd like to start off with just a broad question, and then once you've answered that, I have a heuristic where I divide the process into broadly an analytic side, an operational side, and a political side, and I have some more specific questions relating to these three aspects. But first, what I'd like you to do is if you could describe the process of India's engagement with the NDC, sort of from the beginning, 2014, 2015, when the INDC was drafted, and all the way through to now, whatever developments have happened in the last 5 years, and also now in the lead up to the COP in Glasgow on this India's engagement with the question of submitting an updated NDC or not, and how sort of who's involved and what goes into that process.
Okay, in case of India, the preparation process of NDCs, in my view, actually goes back to the Copenhagen Pledges time. So it started with that. And in fact, a little bit earlier when India was discussing its National Action Plan on Climate Change. Okay. Now, so if you look at these three different documents, the National Action Plan on Climate Change, Copenhagen Pledge, and then NDC, you find a remarkable consistency as far as the mitigation is concerned, right? So the major emphasis in the National Action Plan was on the co-benefits approach, but focus was on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sinks, right? And there were certain targets that were already established under the National Action Plan. So you see the Copenhagen pledges were not really very far from those targets. And then if you look at the Copenhagen pledges and the NDCs, then there is also the same pattern. It's just a revision of Copenhagen pledges. Broadly, the language remains the same. Of course, the background document and background details and listing of programs and more specification of specific technologies that India would like to focus, or more quantified sectoral, particularly in energy and energy sector, also particularly in power sector and forestry. They were specified, but it's an extension. So your Copenhagen pledge was 20-25% deviation. Now you have 33 to 35% deviation with a new timeline. And the background exercise was also, in terms of quantitative analysis, it was based on energy economy models that Indian government has broadly relied upon in taking these decisions. But what was new in the NDC preparation process was that the process was way more open and dialogical. The dialogues with outside the government were more broad-based. The inputs that Indian government considered were more broad-based. So while you had a technical track where the different research organizations were asked to develop modeling-based scenarios, quantitative scenarios about what can happen, what would be the what is feasible, what would be the associated costs, and so on and so forth. But parallelly, the government had an within government process where the Ministry of Environment and Forest circulated a kind of template to different ministries asking for what they are doing, what their status is, what's their status of preparedness is, what is it that they think that they can do. It was not required that the all ministries would do rigorous quantitative analysis, but kind of a sense of what is likely, what the sector is, or what the different industries and are ready to do. And then there was a consultative process with the civil society organizations who were not really doing the quantitative analysis, but they were more on the aspects about what should be what is it that the government should be careful about, how it should think about its targets, to what extent it should be committing or not committing, how it should frame it, and so on. So if you say that while other assessments of India's NDC, they do call that it is recognized that India's NDC is perhaps the only among the larger economies which is closer to the 2-degree target, but then it also has a conditional framing that it is subject to X, Y, Z. The traditional demands of assistance on technology and finance and so on, and developmental priorities. So that is kind of a balancing act that comes from these consultations. And the targets, for example, the target in the power sector actually comes from the I believe that it has a lot to do with the demands that the industrial players in the renewable energy sector were asking for. That they were asking for the larger policy commitment, bigger policy commitment from the government, so that it gives a powerful incentive and a definitive direction for companies to shift their investment strategies. Those demands were being already made as early as 2007, 2008. I had interviewed a couple of industry people then when I was working on the scope of renewable energy policy then, and some of them had said that, look, you have to give us sufficiently large targets so that we can exploit the economies of scale. These are the things that I think eventually fed into the final NDC target.
Mm-hmm. And has that, I'm a little bit confused at the moment. I've gotten conflicting insights from various people about whether or not India intends to submit an update prior to, or in sort of conjunction with the COP coming up in Glasgow in November. There's no legal requirement because India's NDC is already at the 2030 target basis, but I've heard from some that there's no intention to submit an update, and from others that there probably is a process for updating the NDC. Do you have any insights on that?
Well, the discussions on updating are already ongoing. Mm-hmm. If you, a couple of weeks back, a minister did say that government is thinking of, making a legally binding net zero target or something. Now, it's a separate matter whether that would be submitted as the revised NDC or not. Mm-hmm. Okay, because if you look at India's commitments under NDCs and other domestic commitments, there is a kind of a similarity of direction, but in terms of content, there is a divergence, or there is a rift, I should say. So, for example, let's say on solar, on renewables, India has had a domestic target even before Paris and NDCs, 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, right? And then in the NDC, you have 40% of your installed power generation capacity to be from the non-fossil